June 5th, 1944. The wind whipped across the Normandy coast, carrying the salty tang of the English Channel as Field Marshal. Erwin Rommel stood on the cliffs near La Roche-Guyon, his French headquarters. His boots crunched on the gravel, and he adjusted his cap against the drizzle, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon where grey waves crashed against the shore. At 52, the desert fox, once the scourge of North Africa, felt the weight of exhaustion in his bones, a nagging headache from the endless inspections of Hitler's vaunted Atlantic Wall. He turned to his aide, Captain Helmuth Lang, and murmured, "The weather is our ally today. No sane general would launch an invasion in this storm." But Rommel knew better than to trust the skies. For months he'd been racing against time, fortifying 2,000 miles of coastline from Norway to Spain with minefields, bunkers and barbed wire. The Allies were coming. He could feel it in his gut. The same instinct that had won him fame in the sands of Tobruk and El Alamein. Reports flooded in, aerial reconnaissance spotting massive troop buildups in southern England, whispers of an American general, George Patton, massing forces near Dover. If the invasion hit Calais, as intelligence suggested, Rommel's panzers could crush it on the beaches, yet doubt gnawed at him. Why did the enemy seem so obvious? In Berlin, Hitler ranted about the inevitable assault, but Rommel saw the human cost. Millions of lives, the crumbling Reich, his own family back in Herrlingen, where he planned to slip away for his wife Lucy's birthday tomorrow. As dusk fell, Rommel climbed into his staff car, the engine rumbling to life. Little did he know, across the channel, the greatest deception in history was unfolding. Phantom armies of inflatable tanks and dummy aircraft, orchestrated by Allied spy masters to lure him into a fatal miscalculation. The storm hid more than rain. It concealed the dawn of D-Day. Dawn broke on June 6, 1944, with the sky still bruised by storm clouds. At 5:30 a.m., the telephone rang in Rommel's chateau headquarters at La Roche-Guyon. He was already 200 miles away, driving through the Black Forest toward Herrlingen, a birthday gift for Lucy tucked in his luggage. Chief of Staff General Hans Speidel took the call. Paratroopers, thousands of them, were dropping behind Utah and Omaha beaches. Naval shells were pounding the coast. Between the Cotentin Peninsula and the Orne River, Speidel's voice remained calm as he relayed the news to subordinates. But inside the operations room, maps suddenly felt too small. By 10 a.m., confirmed reports reached Army Group B. 5 Allied divisions had landed across a 60-mile front in Normandy. Not Calais, not the Pas-de-Calais, where the entire German 15th Army waited, anchored by the phantom threat of General Patton's First United States. Army Group FUSAG, an army that existed only on paper in radio chatter, and in carefully staged photographs of inflatable tanks and plywood aircraft parked in Kent Fields. Rommel's staff car screeched to a halt outside. When the urgent recall reached him, he stood in the road for a moment, coat unbuttoned, staring at nothing. Captain Lang watched the Field Marshal's face harden. "They've fooled us," Rommel said quietly. "Completely." He climbed back into the horse without another word, and the driver pushed the engine to its limit, racing west through bombed-out towns and refugee columns. Back in Normandy, the Atlantic Wall, Rommel's obsession, his promise to Hitler, was cracking under the weight of real steel and real blood. Young soldiers from the 716th Static Division, many of them conscripted Poles and Russians who barely spoke German, emerged from bunkers into a wall of fire they could not comprehend. The deception had worked too well. Every available panzer reserve sat frozen north of the Seine, waiting for an invasion that would never come. June 7th, 1944, the Hoch staff car roared into the courtyard of La Roche-Guyon just after midnight. Rommel stepped out, coat dusted with road grime, eyes bloodshot from 18 hours behind the windshield. The chateau's windows glowed faintly. Inside, the operations room hummed with the low murmur of radios and the scratch of pencils on maps. Speidel met him at the door, face drawn. "It's worse than we feared," the general said. "The beachheads are linking up. They have air supremacy, complete." Rommel strode to the situation map without removing his cap. Red arrows pushed inland from 5 separate lodgements. Warren still held, but only just. He traced the line north to the Pas-de-Calais with one finger, then let his hand fall. For weeks, German reconnaissance aircraft had photographed Patton's army in Kent. Entire divisions of rubber tanks, canvas trucks, vague landing craft clustered in harbors. Radio traffic had crackled with authentic-sounding American chatter. Orders, complaints, even baseball scores, all scripted by Allied intelligence. Double agents controlled by MI5 had fed Berlin exactly what it wanted to hear. The main blow would fall across the narrowest part of the channel. Now the truth stared back from the map. WWII had been a mirage, a ghost army of 50 divisions that never existed. The real invasion had come where Rommel had always feared it might, Normandy. Yet every panzer group he needed sat immobilized, waiting for Hitler's personal release order. The Führer was asleep in Berchtesgaden. No one dared wake him. Rommel turned to his armored commanders on the phone that night. "Gentlemen," he said, voice low and edged with fury, "we have been outwitted on a scale I have never seen. The enemy has played us like fools." June 8, 1944. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the chateau as Rommel gathered his senior commanders in the map room. Coffee steamed in porcelain cups untouched. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the quiet anger of men who knew they had been outmaneuvered. Rommel stood before the wall map, pointer in hand, his voice steady but laced with bitterness. "Operation Fortitude," he said, the name bitter on his tongue. "That is what they call it. A masterpiece of deception." While we stared across the Dover Strait at Patton's Phantom, Army rubber tanks that could be deflated and moved overnight. Landing craft made of canvas and plywood. Radio networks broadcasting false traffic. Day and night, the real blow fell here. The pointer tapped Normandy hard enough to rattle the frame. He recounted the details now pouring in from Abwehr intercepts and captured Allied documents. A shadowy unit called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. American artists and sound engineers who built an army of illusions. Inflatable Shermans that fooled Luftwaffe reconnaissance from 5,000 feet. Loudspeakers blaring the rumble of tank columns on the move. Even fake shoulder patches sewn onto uniforms in English pubs, visible to German spies. Rommel's eyes met those of General Dietrich von Koltitz, commander of the 84th Corps. We tied down 20 divisions, 20 for a threat that never existed. The 15th Army still sits idle north of the Seine because the Führer believes the second larger landing is yet to come. He paused, the silence heavy. "I have fought the British 8th Army across deserts. I have faced Montgomery's caution and Patton's fury. But this is something new. They have beaten us with shadows." June 9th, 1944, the sun beat down on the Normandy hedgerows as Rommel climbed into a Kübelwagen for the front. Dust rose behind the convoy as it sped, along cratered roads toward Caen. He needed to see the deception's consequences with his own eyes. Shell holes gaped like fresh wounds. Burned-out Shermans and Panthers lay entwined in grotesque embraces. German prisoners shuffled past under American guard, faces blank with shock. Allied J-bows, fighter bombers, ruled the sky, strafing anything that moved. At the headquarters of the 21st Panzer Division outside Caen, Rommel met General Edgar Feuchtinger. The division had counterattacked. On D-Day itself, the only panzer unit close enough to reach the beaches, but too late, too weak, and without air cover. Feuchtinger spread aerial photographs across the table. Rows of inflatable tanks still parked in English fields, some half deflated like discarded toys. "They kept our Luftwaffe chasing ghosts for months," Feuchtinger said. "Our pilots reported hundreds of vehicles every flight. We believed them." Rommel stared at the images. The rubber decoys were convincing even now. Shadows cast perfectly. Tire tracks raked into the mud. He remembered his own memos to Berlin warning that the Allies would attempt large-scale deception. They had been ignored. Hitler and the OKW clung to the myth of Calais because it fit their preconceptions, because double agents like Garbo and Brutus fed them exactly the story they wanted to hear. He folded the photographs slowly. "We did not lose this battle on the beaches," he told Feuchtinger. We lost it in Kent and Dover, staring at an army that was never there. June 12, 1944. In a forward command post near Livarot, Rommel watched as the Panzer Lehr division rolled past in columns of dust and exhaust. General Fritz Bayerlein, its commander, saluted from his half-track. These were some of the finest tanks in the West. Panthers with sloped armor, tigers that had terrorized the Soviets, but they moved slowly, only at night, hunted relentlessly from the air. Every bridge crossing became a gamble, every open road a killing ground. That evening, around a folding table lit by a single lamp, Rommel spoke plainly to Bayerlein and Seppi. Dietrich of the ESS Panzer. Corps, the enemy's deception, has cost us the initiative, he said, jabbing a finger at the map. Because we waited for Patton's ghost army to cross at Calais, the real forces have had 6 days to dig in. Now we face fortified hedgerows, naval guns that outrange anything we possess, and an umbrella of aircraft that turns daylight movement into suicide. He unfolded a captured Allied intelligence summary taken from a dead American officer near Carentan that detailed Operation Fortitude south in chilling clarity, the fictitious order of battle, the scripted radio nets, even the fake headquarters emitting Morse traffic from Norfolk. Rommel's voice dropped. They invented an entire army group, complete with a commander famous for boldness, and we swallowed it whole. I warned the Führer that the enemy would attempt something like this. He preferred to believe his own intuition. Bayerlein shifted uncomfortably. What now, Herr Feldmarschall? Rommel's answer came cold and immediate. We fight with what we have, where we are. But the war in the West is already decided. June 17th, 1944. Rommel stood on a low rise outside. Saint-Pierre-sur-Dive, field glasses pressed to his eyes. Below, the British Second Army was grinding forward in Operation Epsom, trying to outflank Caen. Through drifting smoke, he watched Canadian and Scottish troops advance behind a creeping barrage, their faces grim but determined. For a moment, he lowered the glasses and simply listened. The thunder of naval shells from ships he could not even see, the constant drone of Allied aircraft overhead like angry hornets. That afternoon, in the dim cellar of a half-ruined farmhouse serving as temporary headquarters, Rommel met with General Geyer von Schweppenberg, commander of Panzer Group West. Geyer had barely survived an Allied air attack on his own headquarters days earlier. His predecessor lay buried under the rubble. The general's uniform was still creased with plaster dust. They spoke bluntly, voices low, so the staff outside could not hear. The deception bought them air supremacy, Geyer said. Every reconnaissance flight we sent towards southern England confirmed Patton's army was growing. We reported it faithfully. Berlin believed it. Now we pay the price in blood for every kilometer. Rommel nodded slowly. I have seen enough battlefields to know when the tide has turned. The Atlantic Wall was never more than propaganda. Fortitude turned it into a tombstone. He paused, staring at the flickering lamp. They did not just fool our intelligence. They fooled our hopes. We wanted to believe the decisive battle would come where we were strongest. Instead, it came where we were weakest. And they arrived with everything while we waited for nothing. For the first time in the war, the Desert Fox sounded almost resigned. July 1st, 1944. The Normandy front had hardened into a brutal slog. Rommel's command car threaded through narrow lanes near Villers-Bocage, where the wreckage of a recent battle still smoldered. The air reeked of cordite and diesel. He stopped at a forward aid station, stepping over stretchers where young grenadiers groaned under blood-soaked bandages. A medic, sleeves rolled high, looked up and saluted wearily. Rommel knelt beside a wounded Obergefreiter from the 12th SS Panzer Division. Barely 18, his face pale beneath the grime. How did it happen? Rommel asked quietly. Jabos, Herr Feldmarschall, the boy whispered. They came out of nowhere. We couldn't move in daylight anymore. Rommel stood and walked away from the tents, staring across fields pockmarked with craters. In his mind, the deception played again like a cruel film reel. The endless reconnaissance reports confirming Patton's build-up, the double agent's flawless lies, the OKW's stubborn refusal to shift reserves south. Every day, the Allies poured more men and material across. The real beaches, while the 15th Army 200,000 soldiers continued to guard against an invasion that had been a mirage from the start. That night back at La Roche-Guyon, Rommel dictated a new assessment for Rundstedt and the Führer's headquarters. His words were measured but unflinching. The enemy's large-scale deception operations have succeeded beyond anything we imagined possible. By fixing our gaze on the Pas-de-Calais with a phantom army, they have gained the time and space to make their lodgment unbreakable. Our material losses under constant air attack are irreplaceable. The war in the West can no longer be won. He sealed the report, knowing it would enrage Berlin, but the truth had become undeniable. July 14th, 1944. Rommel's staff car sped along a straight Norman road near Vimoutiers, the driver pushing the Hoch to keep pace with urgent dispatches. The Field Marshal sat in the open top, cap pulled low, scanning the sky out of habit. Allied fighter bombers owned these summer days. German vehicles moved only in short, desperate dashes. At 4:15 p.m., the attack came without warning, two Typhoons streaking low, rockets flashing from beneath their wings. The first salvo missed. The second did not. The car swerved violently, slammed into a tree stump and rolled. Rommel was thrown clear, his skull fractured, blood streaming from a deep gash above his eye. Captain Lang and the driver lay motionless. A passing Wehrmacht column rushed him to a field hospital at Bernay, then by ambulance to the Luftwaffe hospital at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. For 3 days, he hovered between life and death, drifting in and out of consciousness. In the brief moments of clarity, aides read him the latest situation reports. The British breaking toward Caen at last. American armor erupting from the Cotentin in Operation Cobra. The 15th Army still frozen in place, guarding the empty Channel against Patton's ghost divisions that had never existed and never would. On July 17th, as surgeons fought to save him, Rommel murmured to his wife Lucy at his bedside. Voice weak but clear, "They beat us with shadows, and now the shadows have become real." He knew the front was collapsing, that the deception's final price was being paid in full. The man who had once outmaneuvered the British across Africa had finally met a deception greater than any he had ever conceived. October 14th, 1944. The autumn leaves fell gently around the Rommel home in Herlingen, a quiet village in Swabia. Erwin Rommel sat in his study, still pale from the summer's injuries. His fractured skull mended, but the headaches lingering. He moved carefully, the Desert Fox now confined to a uniform without campaigns. The Normandy front had shattered in August, American armor racing to the Seine. The 15th Army finally scrambling south far too late. Patton's real divisions now tearing across France while his ghost army dissolved into history books. That morning, 2 staff cars pulled up outside. General Wilhelm Burgdorf and General Ernst Meisel stepped out, bearing a briefcase from Berlin. They were Hitler's emissaries. The July 20th bomb plot had failed, but Rommel's name had surfaced in the interrogations. Old conversations with conspirators, his growing conviction that the war was lost, his private calls for the Führer to seek peace. In the living room, with Lucy and 15-year-old Manfred waiting upstairs, Burgdorf laid the choice before him: a public trial for treason that would destroy his family, or a quiet end with full military honors and protection for his wife and son. A cyanide capsule rested on the table like a final order. Rommel stood, straightened his tunic, and kissed Lucy goodbye. "In 15 minutes I will be dead," he told her calmly. He climbed into the car with the generals and drove away down the leaf-strewn lane. The official story would call it a cerebral embolism from his wounds. But in his last moments, as the poison took hold, those who knew him believed he carried one final, unspoken thought. The Allies had not merely defeated him on the battlefield, they had outwitted him with illusion so complete that an entire army fought phantoms while the real storm broke elsewhere. The Desert Fox, master of maneuver, had been outmaneuvered by ghosts, and in the end, those shadows helped seal the fate of the Reich itself. The war in Europe would rage another 7 months, but for Rommel, the realization had come earlier. Bitter and complete, The greatest deception of the war had not just won a battle, it had helped win the war.